Darkness stretched infinitely beyond the jagged hull of the Twilight Specter, a leviathan adrift in the void. A dead ship. No crew. No life. Only whispers carried by the silence of an alien graveyard. Then, a shudder, like the first pulse of a dying body refusing to surrender. A dim glow crawled through the neural veins lining the ship's corridors, illuminating the walls with a pulse like a heartbeat too weak to sustain life. Something stirred within the heart of the dreadnought. Something that shouldn't be alive. Lieutenant. Elias Vance gasped back into consciousness, lungs convulsing, drowning in air too thick and sterile. His muscles screamed against the stiffness of enforced slumber. A prison of glass and steel encased him, a cryopod blinking warnings in a language he did not recognize. His last memory was fire, blinding white light, the roar of annihilation. His ship torn apart around him. He should be dead. The pod cracked open with a hiss. Ice crystals flaked from his skin, a sheen of frost melting into sweat. His boots met metal, slick, foreign, humming with a presence that set his nerves on edge. The air was wrong. Too cold. Too clean. The ship exhaled a breath of its own, and with it, the whispering began. He wasn't alone. The chamber stretched outward into an abyss of shadows, the architecture jagged and sleek, walls whispering with a bioluminescent glow that pulsed to an unseen rhythm. Symbols spiraled along the surfaces, etched into the metal, shifting like they were alive. His mind reeled, trying to place the language, but recognition eluded him. A sound like a sigh drifted through the empty hall. Not his own. He turned, heart hammering. Nothing. Just the vastness of the chamber, the yawning darkness beyond. And yet the sensation pressed against his senses, a presence unseen just beyond his reach. Elias staggered forward, body still sluggish from cryo-sleep. The ship responded. Lights flickered in cascading patterns, illuminating his path. The floor vibrated beneath his steps, subtly adjusting to his weight. This wasn't a derelict ruin. The ship was alive. Then he saw them, faint figures, silhouettes against the dim glow, drifting like echoes in the periphery of his vision. Not flesh and blood, not shadows. They flickered, transparent yet tangible, trapped in a loop of motion that never quite solidified. The remnants of the ship's crew. Ghosts. Elias felt the chill coil around his spine as he approached the nearest figure. It turned. Its face was alien, angular, elongated, with eyes that should have been empty voids, but saw him. Recognition flared in that spectral gaze, followed by something darker. Contempt. The whispering surged, growing frantic. The lights overhead pulsed erratically, the ship's exoskeleton vibrating with unseen tension. The figures gathered, lingering, just beyond reach, circling him like vultures awaiting the inevitable. A voice cut through the cacophony, not a whisper but a command, clear and sharp. The nearest ghost snapped its gaze upward, then vanished like mist. The others followed, dissolving into the metal walls as if retreating into the ship itself. Silence fell once more. Elias swallowed hard, exhaling a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His fingers curled into fists, nails digging into his palm. This wasn't death. This wasn't a dream. He was here, on an alien warship, surrounded by the restless dead. And something wanted him to wake up. The ship was awake now. The pulse running through its walls had gained strength, a slow, deliberate rhythm like something testing its own reanimation. Elias felt the vibrations under his fingertips as he traced the strange, shifting symbols carved into the walls, fluid shapes that morphed the longer he stared. The ship was speaking. He just didn't understand the language. A low hum, neither mechanical nor organic, drifted through the passage ahead. The air grew thick, pressing against him like an unseen force testing the limits of his presence. He wasn't supposed to be here. That much was clear. Then the lights flickered, the air turned frigid, the whispering returned. Elias spun, breath caught in his throat. Shadows moved at the edges of his vision, flickering like projections from a broken film reel. The figures reappeared, spectral echoes of the Xelari crew, their translucent forms, distorted by whatever force kept them tethered here. One figure stood apart from the rest, its shape more defined, more aware. It took a slow step toward him, the movement impossibly smooth. A voice, hollow and fractured, sliced through the ship's murmurings. "You should not be." Elias's chest tightened. The words weren't English, but he understood them. The ship was translating. He forced his voice to work. "Where am I?" The figure tilted its head, a flicker of something akin to recognition passing through its gaze. A grave. A sudden, violent shudder ran through the Twilight Specter. The ship groaned, metal contracting like a living thing in pain. A presence stirred deeper within, something ancient and restless. The figures around Elias wavered, their forms distorting as though caught in a storm of static. Then a sound, sharp, deliberate. A command. The ghostly figures vanished. The air settled, but the presence had not gone. The ship had made its decision, and Elias knew, without a doubt, that his time aboard the Twilight Specter was only beginning. The ship was no longer content to merely observe him. It had tested his presence, studied his responses, and now it sought something more. The corridors shifted, rearranging like the insides of a living labyrinth. What had once been a straight path now curved impossibly, leading Elias toward a destination he neither chose nor understood. The whispering returned, not as a chaotic murmur but as something more deliberate, structured, layered, like voices, overlapping in discordant harmony. The ship was speaking, but so were the ghosts. Elias moved carefully, his body still sluggish from cryo-sleep, yet his instincts were on high alert. The air itself seemed charged, thick with the weight of unseen eyes. He turned a corner and the hallway widened into a vast chamber, its walls pulsing with lines of shifting bioluminescent script. Floating above the floor, suspended in a gravity-defying dance, were a dozen shimmering figures, frozen in the last moments of their lives. Some stood as though issuing commands, spectral arms extended in gestures of urgency. Others curled into, themselves locked in expressions of horror. But the most unsettling were those who faced the center of the room, their gazes empty, their postures reverent. And at the center, embedded in a raised platform, was the heart of the ship, a pulsating, crystalline core, the ship's neural hub. Elias hesitated, but then the whispering voices congealed into a single thought, projected directly into his mind. "You do not belong, yet you remain." Pain lanced through his skull. His vision blurred, fragmented into jagged memories that were not his own. A war. The Xelari fleet. The final battle. He saw ships burning, felt the weight of orders given in desperation. The Xelari had not planned to die here. They had fought for something, for someone, and that cause had been lost with them. Elias collapsed to one knee, breath ragged. The ship was showing him its past, forcing him to witness what had come before. But why? A new presence entered the chamber, stronger, more defined. She emerged from the ether like a figure stepping from a dream, Commander Vrincal. Unlike the others, her form did not flicker. She was more than an echo. She was aware. Her gaze burned into him, sharp and assessing. "The ship has not rejected you." Elias forced himself to his feet, his pulse hammering. "Seems like it wants something from me." Her expression did not change, but the air around her shimmered with restrained tension. Yes. A new tremor passed through the ship. A warning. Elias had entered the heart of the Twilight Specter, and now the dead were watching, waiting, and not all of them wanted him alive. The ship was alive with tension, an undercurrent of unseen forces shifting just beyond comprehension. Elias could feel it, a pulse in the walls, a hum beneath his feet, a presence lurking within the neural core. The chamber had become a silent battleground, and he stood at the center of it, a pawn caught between the warring dead. Commander Vrincal moved closer, her spectral form more stable than the other echoes. "The ship recognizes you," she said. Her voice layered with something Elias couldn't decipher, reluctance, curiosity, perhaps even fear. "But the others, they do not agree on what should be done with you." Elias turned, scanning the chamber. The other Xelari ghosts had materialized, forming a circle around the room's perimeter. Their expressions varied, some neutral, some seething, others unreadable. But there was one whose presence exuded something different entirely. High strategist, Solvek. His form burned brighter than the others, the edges of his translucent figure flickering with rage barely contained. His voice struck the air like a blade. "This thing is not one of us, it is an anomaly, an infection that must be purged." The whispering around them grew more frantic, a cacophony of agreement and dissent. The ship itself shuddered, as if torn between conflicting commands. The lights dimmed, then flared violently. The neural core pulsed, erratic and unstable. Elias gritted his teeth. He knew where this was going. The ship was at war with itself, with the ghosts of its own crew locked in a struggle that had outlived their physical forms. And he was the variable neither side had accounted for. "I don't want your war," he said, his voice low but firm. "I just want to survive." Solvek's form flared, and in an instant he surged toward Elias, spectral energy twisting around him like grasping tendrils. Pain ignited through Elias's skull. His vision fractured. The ship's memories flooded into him, overwhelming his senses. 1,000 voices screaming, weapons firing, bodies disintegrating in the void. The last desperate stand of the Xelari, their fleet torn apart by the might of the human armada, and the final order. The Twilight Specter was never meant to be a tomb. It was meant to be a weapon, a doomsday vessel programmed to finish what the Xelari had started. The ship was still following that command. Even now it drifted toward the nearest human colony, its systems priming. For one last catastrophic strike. Elias staggered, his mind reeling. "You're going to destroy thousands of lives for a war that's already over." Solvek's spectral form twisted in fury. "They destroyed us. We will finish what we started." The chamber trembled as the neural core flared brighter, responding to his will. The ship's systems activated, thrusters engaging, weapons priming. The countdown had begun. Commander Vryn Cal stepped between them, her form crackling with defiance. "The war is over, strategist. We lost. Then we will make sure humanity loses as well." Elias clenched his fists. His choices were narrowing. The ship was responding to the strongest will in the room, and right now that was Solvek. If Elias didn't take control, thousands would die. The neural interface loomed before him, its energy erratic and unstable. It needed a living mind to override the command, but merging with it meant surrendering something of himself, his humanity. "Elias," Vryn Cal said, her voice steadier now, more certain. "The ship will listen to you if you take control. But once you do, there is no turning back." Solvek lunged forward again, his presence searing through Elias's thoughts, trying to bend him to force him to comply. "You are weak. You are nothing. This is beyond you." Elias grit his teeth, ignoring, the pain lancing through his mind. "Yeah?" His eyes locked onto the neural core. "Then let's find out." He reached out and let the Twilight Specter take him. The moment Elias made contact with the neural core, the ship awakened. A surge of energy ripped through him, burning through his nerves like wildfire. His consciousness expanded, stretching beyond the confines of flesh, bleeding into the ship's systems. For the first time, the Twilight Specter had a living pilot. The war-torn memories of the Xelari consumed him. Pain, loss, fury, an entire species screaming in defiance against extinction. But beneath the rage, buried deep within the ship's fractured mind, something else lingered. Regret. A desperate longing to undo the past. Elias latched onto that, wielding it like a weapon against Solvek's fury. "The war is over." His voice resonated through the ship, amplified beyond sound, projected into every corner of the vessel's existence. "Your people are gone. Your vengeance is meaningless, Zolvek howled, his spectral form flickering, writhing in resistance. No, we were betrayed. We must finish what we started. Elias felt the ship tremble beneath his will. The weapon systems were primed, the final attack sequence locked. The colony below was in range. The ship was still following orders given by ghosts. No more. With every ounce of strength he had left, Elias poured himself into the neural core, forcing his presence deeper, overwriting the ship's command sequence, severing the Xelari's last, dying wish. The ship resisted, but Elias was alive, and the living had the final say. The thrusters disengaged, the weapon systems powered down. The ship's violent hum faltered, then silenced. Zolvek let out one last furious shriek as his form disintegrated into nothing. The echoes of the dead faded. The whispers ceased. The Twilight Specter was no longer a vessel of vengeance. For the first time since the battle that doomed its crew, the ship was still. Elias collapsed, his body weak, his mind forever changed. The connection with the ship remained, lingering just beneath his thoughts. He wasn't the same man who had woken up in the cryopod. He wasn't entirely human anymore. Commander Vrincal remained, her spectral form standing over him more stable than before. You have done what we could not. Elias forced a breath, every muscle aching. Yeah, lucky me. She gazed at him for a long moment, unreadable, before nodding. The ship is yours now. The realization settled over him. He had stopped the attack. He had rewritten the ship's purpose. But he was now bound to the Twilight Specter in a way he never could have imagined. He was its captain. And the last ghost left aboard. The void stretched infinitely ahead, an ocean of silence and starlight. The Twilight Specter drifted, no longer a harbinger of war, but a vessel untethered from its past. The ghosts had faded. The whispers were gone. Only Elias remained, seated in the command chair of a ship that had once been the weapon of a dead empire. His hands gripped the armrests, fingers brushing over smooth alien controls that now responded to his very thoughts. He could feel the ship's pulse, its systems, its vast neural network. It was still alive, but no longer bound by the dying rage of the Xelari. It answered only to him now. A console flickered, displaying a map of the sector. The human colony below, once marked for destruction, blinked peacefully in the distance. They had no idea how close they had come to annihilation. Elias exhaled, a weary smile ghosting his lips. He had saved them, but what now? A soft shimmer materialized beside him. Commander Vrincal, the last echo of the Xelari fleet, standing watch in the quiet of the void. Unlike before, she was more than just a memory. She was something else now, like the ship itself, a remnant that refused to fade. What will you do now, Elias Vance? He stared at the vast nothingness beyond the bridge. The war was over. His old life was gone. He had no place in the human fleet anymore. Not after what he had become. But the ship had been built for war, a relic of an extinct species. And somewhere beyond the nebula, the universe stretched wide and unknown. Elias smirked. I think I'll go see what's out there. A new course plotted itself on the screen, unprompted. A world deep in the remnants of the Xelari Empire, one not marked on human star maps. A world with secrets waiting to be uncovered. The engines hummed to life, carrying the Twilight Specter into the great beyond. The war was over. The story was just beginning.